Hello, I am Srushti Gavare and I am an Avanti Fellow. I am 17 years old and I am currently studying at JNV Chandrapur in Maharashtra. I love studying mathematics and I want to become an IAS officer. Welcome to Avanti, a show where incredible women who are at the top of their fields share the obstacles they had to overcome to get there. Here's our host, Vandana Goyal.
Prashasti Singh grew up in Uttar Pradesh, India, where her father was a doctor and her mother a Hindi professor. Despite her modest beginnings in a close-knit family, Prashasti had a relentless drive to be successful. It was this drive that helped her flourish at Netaji Subhash Institute of Technology, where she studied electronics and communication engineering, as well as at IIM Lucknow. While working at Star India, Prashasti would spend every free moment she had at improv classes and comedy open mics, setting the stage for a dramatic career shift. Her big break came with Amazon Prime Video's Comicstaan, leading to her bold decision to leave her corporate job and pursue stand-up comedy full-time. Welcome, Prashasti.
Thank you for having me here, Vandana.
Full disclosure, you're a friend of my best friend, Kaniz.
Yes.
That's how I found out about you and knew about your history. And when we decided to do a show for Avanti Fellows about women in STEM who've gone on to do interesting things, you immediately came to mind. So thank you so much.
So glad. Thank you.
Yeah. So we're going to start in Amethi. Amethi is in a northern Indian state.
Yeah. It's in eastern Uttar Pradesh.
So you grew up in something called the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited Factory Township.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Hindustan Aeronautics Limited is a bunch of factory units spread across India that make parts of Jaguar fighter planes. Yeah, and then they get assembled in Bangalore. All the Air Force planes that you see, which are built inside the country, HAL, Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, is the factory that builds it. I mean, it is a very small town where nothing would have happened otherwise. But because it was the hub of Congress at some point, so they really built a lot of industry to give employment to people
Understood.
there. So my father used to be a doctor, actually. What happened was my father took the job in Amethi because my maternal side lives in Amethi. It was a great life because I was in a factory township, in a small place. So it had all the amenities of a city, not the worldview of the city, but, it was a village with proper houses, proper schools, proper hospitals. So everything good that you can take from, the modern world was there. And outside the township was the village. And in that part, my maternal side of the family used to stay.
Okay.
So literally my nani ghar was very close. But it was 7 kilometers away from where we were staying. So it was very balanced childhood that way. It was great.
And your mother was a Hindi professor?
Yeah. So she just retired a couple of years back. But yeah, she's been teaching Hindi all her life.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And was there expectation from them that you would achieve a certain level of academic?
Oh, yeah, of course. So I think my parents together would probably be the most educated unit in their entire family.
Wow.
I did not appreciate this when I was growing up. But now when I look back, I'm like, my mother is a PhD, which is something no one has even thought of doing in her family. One of her elder brothers is a PhD. But as a woman, for her to, have that goal and for her father to support her through that goal was so extraordinary because at best they would get them married to a good guy, right? So my mother was very educated and my father, I think when he was looking for a bride, or his only criteria was my wife should be very educated.
Where did that come from in your mom?
My grandfather also was a professor. My mother says that, he actually was a visionary, that he was the one, he had 7 kids and he had 2 daughters in the middle of that. And he told his daughters that, it's going to be a difficult world, but if you want to study, I'll support you. In those times, if you live in a village, there's no concept of hostels. You have to go live with a relative and study.
Yes.
So my mother tells me that between her and her sister had no inclination to study. She was like, nope, I want to enjoy my life. But my mother really saw the opportunity in this. in those times, that was a challenge as a woman, that you're staying with your chachi chacha who are trying to be nice,
But they
in
don't
their
really want
heads,
you
but they're
there.
not. Yeah, they don't
Yeah.
want. You are always a burden. But she could see that, this opportunity that has come to her doesn't come to people easily. My Mossy, my aunt, for example, my Mossy's perspective in life was very different. Everyone figures out how to have a, happy and fulfilled life.
Yeah.
You begin at the same place, but, just what you choose to do in these small decisions can change your life so dramatically. So, because my mother pursued education, she got married to a person who really valued education. So then the dream was, okay, we live in this small place, we don't know where the world is going, but we know that if we make sure our kids go to the best institutions, they will figure it out from there.
Which is true.
Yeah, which is also true.
Yeah.
Today, I'm not doing anything related to engineering or MBA, but I know that, like, that push my parents gave me put me in the middle of a lot of other kids who were ambitious, who had curiosity towards the world. If I had not topped my school in class 10th, for example, I would never have gone to Delhi. And if I'd never gone to Delhi to study, I would have never known the world that opened up to me after that. So, yeah, I'm very thankful for them for being so education focused.
And you never felt any different from your brother. You have one brother.
We were staying in a township full of engineers, but even there to see a couple where both of them are, double degrees or triple degrees was rare. Like typically the wives would be housewives, would be homemakers. So my both parents were aware of the responsibility they had to have a very different and progressive household. So from their end, they really always tried to never discriminate. But I think there's some differences in attitude you can see more in my mother than my father, that she would not do it consciously. Like, for example, she would definitely be more lenient on my brother when it comes to food. Like, he would say, I don't want to eat tomato in my dal. So she would just literally pick it all out. I'm like, this, I would not have been allowed this. Okay, so in very small, subtle ways, I could see that, they were both working. They were both making similar money also. My mother's putting more hours of work every day. But I think now that I've discussed in therapy also, that even though there was on paper a very equal household, because of where they were coming from, because of how society was, there was a clear power difference. And my mother really used to look at my father as the man of the house. And he would be the one who would have the final call. And he would be more scared of my dad than my mother, of course. So all those things was there subtly. But other than that, they really tried. For example, when I did well in class 10th, again, we were a limited income, even though both of them are earning, it was a very fairly middle class setup. So sending me to Delhi, and I was going to DPS RK, which is a very fancy school. The hostel fee is pretty steep compared to all other hostels. Because a lot of people I've seen, by the way, in my friends' households where the daughter would do well, but they would not spend money on the daughter's education because we have limited money and the son gets that money on education. So my parents are very practical about this, that, what, we will figure out how to pay for his education. Also, they were like, we don't know how well he'll do. Like, there is one child who's doing well. We need to put our bets on these horses. If this one does well, we'll figure it out. They were very clear on how they wanted to raise their kids.
I've read somewhere that you credit your dad for being the biggest influence in your life.
Yeah.
How so?
Growing up, basically, I would see my father as my hero, which is, I think, common, which is very normal for a lot of girls growing up. Okay, our daddies are our heroes. It was to the extent that, I would not see the contribution of my mother in my life at the time. My father had grown up in a village.
Yeah.
He managed to study in a college. So he was not really exposed to the big life. But even then, for him to have this vision that, where you start should not define where you get to. And that really has defined the trajectories, or at least started trajectories for all of our lives. Me, my brother, the fact that I could at some point in my life, even, I became a standard comedian after he passed away. And sometimes the same thing would cause friction between us. Because, of course, he had this vision, but he was again a father, a patriarch, raising kids 20, 30 years before this time. But that was very healthy friction.
Yeah.
That, I would tell him that you have taught me to look beyond this. When I was getting into engineering college, I had one opportunity to go to IIT Roorkee and do metallurgy, which is not a branch that a lot of people go for. Even though, again, as a grown up, I feel if I had gone there and really put my head into it, something interesting could have come out of it. But at that time, electronics, computer science, all of those are things you do. So that was one option, but it was IIT. And the second option was go to Delhi, take admission under Delhi University College, which is what I did. And I told my parents, one is, of course, I'm getting get a branch there. But to be honest, I've studied for 2 years in Delhi in a school. And now I don't want to go back to a small town. Okay.
Oh, that's why you decided.
Yeah, I really feel it makes a lot of difference. And for my parents to keep their pride aside, they would not be able to brag about IIT to people after this and understand that, you know what, this makes sense.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a very big deal.
Yeah.
You know, it's a number of things my parents did right, a number of things they did not do right. But this is one thing that they really did right.
Yeah. I was really sad to read that your father passed away
Yeah.
13 years ago.
Yeah.
I lost my mom 3 years ago, and I know how it affected me.
Yeah.
How did that loss change your life?
Oh, I think it changed the trajectory of my life dramatically. If in any story, there's one inciting event, I would say it's that, because even though my father has been such a strong influence in my life, it's a very twisted thing to understand and say that by the time I was 23, 24, I was absolutely not prepared for this loss. And of course, he was a doctor. Both my parents live a fairly healthy lifestyle and they would get regular tests done. So there was nothing on the horizon. It's not that he'd had some heart attacks before, there was any fragility in the system. One, it was very sudden. It just literally, he slept one day, did not get up. So it was that level of sudden. We were not prepared. I was in a stage in my life where I'd done my engineering. I was doing a job in Bangalore and I was figuring out that, I want to do an MBA. So, but my plan really was that, okay, I'm taking CAT. I want to go to an IIM, but my priority is my boyfriend. I was turning 24 that year. And it's a very typical place for someone
A
in
young
early
person.
20s to be.
Absolutely.
It was all normal, but it was also very confusing. And I think when he passed away, of course, it was very difficult because we're not prepared. We don't even know where the money was. He had thankfully put it in a document. Again, for someone who was not sick, who doesn't know this is going to happen, to actually, put it in a way that people who are absolutely no idea can read and understand, okay, this bond is there, this FD is there, this investment is there. So all that really helped, family really helped. But I think that year I really grew up. And I think it took me another 3-4 years to actually process my emotions. What I'm trying to say is that time, the aftermath was very chaotic. But I also feel that as a family, we did find the best way to move forward from it. For example, I realized that now I don't have to constantly live up to his expectations. So I am free to do whatever I do. If I can see him watching me from above, he would want me to excel in whatever I do. And that's the only thing I need to remember. I figured out, again, that once a proper breakdown happens, the good thing about reconstruction is you're looking at everything with fresh eyes. So I still did an MBA, I still did a job, but I think my approach to life really became open. That I was curious about things now. I still feel that, among all my peers and colleagues and everyone I work with, I really feel that in bad situations, I feel less anxious than them because something really bad has happened and gone and we've come through it.
Yeah.
So the kind of resilience it gives you, that really counters the anxiety. But I think once or twice when you've gone through really bad things and you've seen, your systems have the strength to really catch up and navigate through them, you actually feel way less anxious when you're anticipating crisis. You're like, okay, crisis should not happen, but it happens. I know I'll find something inside me to handle it. I'm saying all of this, but you've been through something similar. So, you know what you
But not as young. So, and I think that must have been even harder in some ways. So you actually made it to IIM finally.
I did finally. Thank God. Phew. Yeah. It was a thing.
I'm happy for you. How has that helped you? You talked about the work ethic. Can you speak a little bit to that?
It really has been very useful for me. You can debate, the 2 years of IIMs. And the thing with Indian education system is that a lot of us get into colleges without even knowing what we really want. But the truth, with a highly competitive environment like an IIM, an environment where everyone takes pride in doing well, and in this culture of brilliance, this one way of looking at it, like, it's so cutthroat and you're so competitive, and do you really want that in your life? But the other part of it is, it's like how sportsmen are trained, where they're told that, you need to do your best. Your ethic is doing your best, not in people's eyes, in your own eyes, do your best. And I think that education really reinforces that. And it's very painful at times because, of course, you're comparing yourself with other kids, you're getting grades, everyone's doing so well that whatever you do is not enough. But at the end of that ride, you really feel like, something inside you has become very resilient. Your value system has become very well defined when it
Yeah.
comes to work. That's what I mean. When I do comedy, I don't have to be the most popular comic or the richest comic or the most critically acclaimed comic. I can be happy till the time I know I'm doing my best. I know I'm very unhappy when I'm compromising on that, and of course those lulls also happen. But that value system really makes your life simple.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad that happened.
I'm smiling because I just came back from one of our classrooms. So the students there, this is after your time, but now they have to take JE Advanced to get into IIT.
Yeah.
So we have 4 classrooms across the country where these students are gathered and are studying for advanced. And it's like 43-degree heat. There's 17 hours of
Oh my
preparation.
God.
They wake up at 5:30. They sleep at 10:30, 11. They study for 12 hours. And there's no phones, no TV. They just study. And the one thing I told them when I left, I said, what that's giving you is giving you a leg up
Yeah.
from somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Yeah.
that training is going to stay with you forever.
Yeah.
IIT or no IIT, it's going to stay in you forever.
Yeah.
So that's such a beautiful.
And also, another thing, when you said that the people who come to these classrooms, the great thing about a bunch of people doing it together is it just becomes emotionally less heavy to do it.
Yeah.
The fact that a bunch of students are doing it together, the humanity of it
Yes.
makes the rigor very palatable.
Going back just a little bit, you talked about how you didn't really like math that much until 9th or 10th grade.
Yeah.
And then you had a teacher
Oh, yes.
who helped you not just discover that you liked math, but that you were actually really good at it.
Yes. There are moments in life where a switch flips in your head. And it's very difficult to describe it in any other way. Like, there are a lot of times in life where you try and you slowly get better. But when it comes to maths and to some extent with comedy, that is what happened with me, where I was really struggling till class 9th. I used to sit with my father and he used to sometimes look at what I'm doing and he would get, I was so bad. There's some intuitive gap. When I'm able to visualize things, they become easier for me.
Mhm.
And when it came to numbers, I just did not know that can be the approach. I think probably I had developed some phobia over time, because
Yeah.
my teachers would get angry, my father would get angry. So I think there's some block that, oh my God, this thing I can't do. And yeah, so we had one teacher in class 9th and he was not in our school. So he was a tuition teacher and everyone used to go to his tuition to get better marks in maths. There's a very interesting story I want to tell you. The township was a very safe place. All of us, girls, boys, kids, you could go walking to school, come back to their house. But outside the township was like the village or the bigger town. And we were not allowed to go outside. So he used to operate outside the township. Typically, in his batches, mostly boys would enroll. So when I was in class 9, my parents and 2 other parents were like, we want our girls to get this education. So they really tried very hard to pool in money and get some way to get this guy inside the campus. Where boys, girls all can study and they can rent a place and he can take his classes there. Some auntie agreed that you can have it in my drawing room. And the batch was 15 people, 12 boys and 3 girls. Before the teacher comes, this woman starts acting very nasty
His
with
auntie.
us. Yeah. She starts taunting us that,
Just to the girls.
just the girls. And she also was a school teacher, by the way. So it really hurt because all 3 of us, me and 2 of my friends, we were all academically doing very well. We were
Right.
always doing better than the boys. She started making these snarky comments on how she didn't want this to be like this and, boys will get distracted. Making sound like she's been bullied into this arrangement where the girls have to be sitting here. And I remember all of us, it was so shocking for us that we were really teary-eyed by
Yeah.
the end of this. So the final solution was actually to go outside the campus and take the class. And it was early in the morning at 5-6 a.m. One of our parents used to go ahead on a scooter and 3 of us used to bike
Wow.
behind him to take their class. I'm saying
You
it's
literally cycled to school.
to that tuition
Wow.
class. Yeah. But that teacher really was worth it. He probably saw one spark and probably gave
Yeah.
me back that confidence that, you're not dumb. Or, this heaviness that you carry, that you don't know math, just discard it. and look at it like this. And then I was the best at math. Like I'm like,
Yeah, you
that
topped
kind of-
your district, I
Yeah.
believe.
I would have solved the toughest book before the teacher would give an assignment in school. I would like, I'm done. That became my hobby. Then my parents would be like, okay, now you go play. I'm like, no, I'll just, I'll solve a maths puzzle book. Okay, so because it had come to me so late, I was like, I really need to
Catch up. So naturally, you must be applying that all the time in your comedy.
Comedy felt similar. I was doing comedy just like that with my profession, and I was very sure that I want to be in a secure job and this probably is not for me. And I remember this one moment on stage, which was actually during the shoot of Comic Stan, and something happened. On camera, it looks horrible, by the way, okay, that episode. But some lock flipped, and I was like, oh my God, the way I feel here, it feels like something I'm made to do. I only had this feeling with maths earlier.
Around this unlock, you were hesitant to pursue comedy initially.
Yeah.
And one of the things that you've cited about feeling that hesitation was around the way that you spoke English and your insecurity around that.
Oh, yeah.
So can you speak to that?
Oh, yes. I think what happens in most of our education, they really train you, they really tell you that for you to be employable, for you to be presentable, English is the language. Like communication soft skill means communicating better in English, and that is the skill you polish, which I polished functionally because I got enough opportunities. But the way I think, I still default to Hindi. So what happened was when I would be giving a presentation, for example, the prepared part would go very well, okay, in the prepared language. But if I have to improvise, if I have to actually, all my intelligence would be very raw, okay, and would be in Hindi, which would never come through. I have to really stick to this act of delivering exactly these words in these ways. Because if I slip, I would not know how to put it back together. I would not know how to navigate naturally. Under pressure, basically, my language skills would crumble. It became more of a problem as I was growing up. My ego became bigger, and I was like, I don't want to humiliate myself ever. So I would just not talk in public. I would never speak on the mic. Because it happened once also, the person who was organizing with me, he got late and I had to really be on the mic and I choked. And it was very humiliating. And I was like, never again will happen. But what happened was, when I was working with Star TV, they make TV serials and they cater to an audience that feels in Hindi. A lot of times when we would do creative presentations, there was no barrier on language because, sometimes what they're explaining to us would come out better in Hindi. So that workplace really broke that barrier that, formal communication or good communication doesn't have to be in one language.
Yes.
It just gave me the starting point. In comedy, actually, I started talking naturally. I realized this particular profession rewards you on thoughts, not so much the language. I don't know when I'm using Hindi, when I'm using English, but till the time I'm engaging them, they're fully understanding. So that was a breakthrough moment again, where I was like, for the first time in my life, my stream of thought can be channelized naturally, because otherwise I was putting in so much pressure to manicure it, edit it. And comedy actually really applauds rawness.
Yes.
So I really discovered parts of me that I really suppressed when I started doing comedy.
And now doing it in Hindi has allowed you to connect with such a
many
wide
people.
audience who probably couldn't even access comedy.
Correct. When I started, the audience was like, oh my God, Hindi comedy, you want more of it, because Hindi comedy was new. I'm talking about 7 years back. And now there are layers to that also. There are people who do comedy fully in Hindi, and their texture of comedy is too desi. And then some people like me have actually come more towards the middle, where, a lot of people who speak, talk, and think like me, which is originated somewhere else, now live in the city. We have half our brains works in English, half is in Hindi, half is probably in some other mother tongue. And there is a big audience for that too. We like her because this khichdi is our language, not this or that.
Beautiful. So at some point, you were still working for many years while you were starting out. And at some point, I think you said, ye garibi wali cheez mujhe nahi karni hai. That was my Hindi. So what made you quit this job and pursue comedy full time?
It was a very calculated decision because, as I said, I was a brand manager at a big company. It was a stressful job, but it had a lot of security. I was doing very well. And I was doing stand-up on the side. And even though I was enjoying it, I was like, correct, I cannot take the stress of making this thing my career because I see so many people struggling. So I was very clear that I don't want to mess up my life with these aspirations. That's why I believe in destiny somehow. What happened was when I was shooting for Comicstan, I took a 2 month sabbatical from work. And in those 2 months, I really fell in love with it. It really, literally, when I went back to my job after that, and a more simpler, kid-friendly metaphor would be that you were raised in a vegetarian household, okay? You went out on a holiday, tasted some chicken popcorn, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So it was something like that, where I got a taste of what that life
Yeah.
would feel like and how good I could be at that. Like maths, I feel so aligned with this. That 6 months I was at my job trying to really convince myself that I need to stick to my job.
Yeah.
You know, that reality show. That's the truth also, that reality show doesn't really change anyone's life. And I was miserable. I could not find a solution. And I spoke to other comics and they were like, you know, if you're at it, you will eventually make money, but it might be a slow graph. And then, like, magically, Comicstan released, and unlike any other reality show, for a few of us, it converted into monetary opportunities very quickly.
Mhm.
Like, literally, if it's released in July, August, September, I was getting queries to perform and, you know, like paid gigs. So I thought that this literally doesn't happen to a lot of people easily. It's like universe has solved my problem. And somehow things have aligned in a way that I can make money out of it. Of course, security is not there, but I need to have faith in me that I'll figure something out. The good thing was, because I was good at my job, all my bosses also told me, and they had no confidence in me being funny. They're like, you? So they're like, we don't know what's happening with you. We don't know how you think you're funny because you've never been that. But we know you're good at your work. So even after 6 months or a year of this experiment, if you feel like coming back, we are here for
can.
you. And there were 3 different people in the company who had 3 different personalities. Okay, one was very mean, one was very honest, one was very nice. But that thing, all of them said that whatever it is, you can come back.
Yeah.
And I never had to go back, touch wood. But the thing is, the kind of confidence it gives you, know, that okay, I've done well in this.
Yeah.
I have a security net, and now I can go play.
You've talked a lot about a few things that I think would really resonate, especially with our students. And one of them is money,
Oh, yeah.
specifically, and how important it is for just basic security, right?
Yes. I think when we were growing up, it was talked about a lot. It was talked about to an extent that our vision got hampered by it.
Yeah.
But I think today it's not getting talked about enough. That at the end of it, you know, you need to sort your basics to be able to be free in the world.
Yeah.
Right? To be able to pay your rent, to be able to take care of your own finances, to be able to have enough to give to someone in need. Okay. Because if throughout the day you have to sit and think of where your next paycheck is going to come from, it's not a great place for creativity to thrive. You need to have a free mind to be able to really discover the magic of the universe, or to actually, you know, invest in good, bigger ideas. Some people are blessed enough, privileged enough, not necessarily their degree is going to be a security net, okay? They have family businesses, or they have a social network that will help them. But for many of us who come from, you know, middle class, lower middle class, or poorer families, our education is our security net. That is one thing no one can take away from us. And again, the communities you build through this education. As I said, my boss is saying that you can come back to the job is one of the things I've earned over years,
Yeah.
right? And all those things become the cushion that you can fall back on. For example, you know, someone as brilliant a sportsman as Sachin. And I'm guessing that kind of brilliance really shines out, you know, in a child. And, you know, hopefully someone will take it and invest in it in that direction. But for many of us, the truth is that we discover what we really want to do in life, what we're really good at, through experiments. And those experiments take time. For me, I figured it out when I was 30. And that's good, because you need to do many things to realize, oh, there are 10 things I'm not good at, 11 things I'm good at. You can't afford to be broke to experiment with 10 things, right?
And you've spoken also about how societally in your
Yeah.
community, becoming a comedian after going to a technical degree, I am working in corporate India,
Yeah.
and then you become a comedian.
Yeah.
How did you cope with that? I'm thinking of the young people out there listening, and saying, I'm also funny, or I'm also great at art, but I'm studying for the JE, right? I'm studying for NEET, but
Yeah.
because I need this education, like you said.
Yeah.
But there's some passion in them, maybe undiscovered or hidden.
There are always two ways of looking at it. One is, again, if Sachin used to bat very well as a kid, it was visible to all. Okay, I'm sure if Lata Mangeshkar was singing the way she sings,
your talent should be visible to someone else aside from you.
No, I was thinking that's the
obvious.
problem with that. With most of us, that a lot of times we feel we have something, and then through brutal experiments we realize that, it is something, but it is not
good enough.
Right? There are ways to navigate through it. But when I speak to the larger set of people, where you feel like there is germ of something, but you're not sure, I would say finish your education. The great thing about good educational institutions, or most educational institutions in India, is that once you go into college, you actually get many avenues to hone these skills further. I know that I was always afraid of public speaking, but throughout my engineering and MBA, I've been on stage as much as I could because I loved the stage. I used to think I'm a dancer, okay, and I was not a bad dancer. And throughout my college, I used to be in the choreography society. Then I started thinking, no, maybe I'm a better actor, okay. So then during my the job I had after engineering in Bangalore, and during my IIM days, I used to do theater. Comedy came to me much later. So my point is, why be in such a hurry? Okay, you're very young. We think of life as, okay, now that I'm doing an MBBS, this is all what my life is. My life doesn't function like that. N number of other things will be happening in life. You will be falling in love, maybe. You will be pursuing a hobby. You will be having an existential crisis and figuring out who you are. The main question was, like, now that I do stand up, after spending 4 years in engineering, 2 years in MBA, and the time before that in prepping and clearing entrance exams, do I feel like it's a waste? I absolutely don't think of it as a waste. That time has given me the confidence I have now to be in the world, and a lot of tools that help me psychologically, emotionally balance myself. All of that has come from that pedigree.
So you've talked about work ethic. You've talked about just the value of education and the foundation it gives you. What are the specific skills, tools that you got from engineering, from management degree training, that you apply even today?
The world we exist in today, okay, the world where we do business and make money, you can actually get very entangled in the noise because it's supposed to look a certain way, talk a certain way, act a certain way. And the real work that goes into making and doing things becomes less of a priority. Engineering cannot be done with faff. You can't talk your way through as an engineer, right? Everything is very tangible. So that respect for tangibility in work. When you write a code, the code has to work. And MBA is business administration, right? They teach you how to manage stuff and they teach you how to make money. So when I went into it, I thought, it's a degree in faffing. Okay, there is this hard skill I've acquired. Now this is soft skill course. But again, as I said earlier, that because the rigor you have to put in is so real, wherever you are in life, you will be aiming for excellence. That, I think, MBA really solidified me. And of course, MBA is a degree in the ways of the world, I feel, okay? How money works, how people are, how industries work. It is good to know it because you don't get shocked in the world after that.
So aside from purely making people laugh and entertaining them, what is the tangible impact you're trying to leave on the world through your work now as a comedian?
And that's a very tough question because I also question it every day. I'm like, what tangible impact I'm leaving on the world? And of course, okay, the one answer can be, you know what, I'm making them laugh. Is it not enough? But I think at some point you start feeling like it's not enough. For your own sake, you want to have a legacy which is beyond this. I try to do a lot of things to make myself feel good. But if I believe in education so much, every time I get an opportunity to help someone financially with education or invest in someone's education, the place I come from, there's already so much work to be done there. So I really try to stay plugged in there and do whatever I can. But to be honest, what I've figured out over last few years, and I know the COVID years were actually where I've sat down and put a lot of thought to it because they were horrible years for, all of us as community. I think if you pick up 5 people in your life, instead of trying to make a big impact all the time, and really be present with their needs and just actively develop kindness inside you. There's so many times you meet people, and because we're so in our heads, we don't even see what's happening to them, right? I'm saying this because during COVID, I became very depressed that, oh my God, so much sadness is happening. So many people are dying. Beyond a point, I can't do anything. And I figured, you know what, if I take care of the person who comes and helps me in my house, if I am always cued into what my watchman is doing, how his life is, if I take care of 3 more people like this, it's a lot.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of difference to their life because I'm genuinely plugged into their life. It's not something I'm doing superficially. It's like planting, plants where you can invest and you can see growth. When you make people's life better, they get motivated to make other people's lives better, right? And I really believe in that chain response. That is my approach to life now.
That's beautiful. That's how we begin to give.
Yeah.
And that's such an important message to leave us with. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm just thinking of all of the people who are listening, young and old, and how you have, I think, dissected your life as a comedic engineer.
That's a great way to put it.
Which is amazing. And I think so relatable. All of those young people who have dreams, who are doing this, it's possible, right?
Yeah,
for your
it
life
is.
to turn
It
out
is.
in
It
many
is.
different ways that you
Yeah.
can't imagine
Yeah.
in that moment. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for
Thank you
sharing so much of yourself.
again. I had a great time.
We have a student named Amulya, who's a grade 10 student from JNV Mandya, who aspires to be a forensic medical examiner. She wants to know, do you have a role model in comedy?
Oh, so many. But I think some of my friends are actually people who inspired me a lot. My friend Biswa. He's not a role model, but he's a big inspiration in comedy. I'm not saying role model because he's my friend. I can't give him that much credit.
Thanks so much to Prashasti for being on the show. If you enjoyed that episode, do tune in every week as we sit down with more remarkable women. This podcast is hosted by Avanti Fellows, a nonprofit that breaks the cycle of poverty in India by providing access to post-secondary education for students from underserved communities. With this show, we aim to inspire thousands of young people with these real-life stories of incredible female leaders who have made a lasting impact on their industries. To learn more about the work we do, visit avantifellows.org.